Welcome back to Aging in Place Strategies and Answers. And I welcome you to my podcast today. And especially if you are someone who is living with Lewy body disease, or if you are caring for somebody who has been diagnosed with Lewy body dementia. In my research, I have learned that there are many organizations that have been created to help those living with a diagnosis of dementia, but also helping someone with a diagnosis of dementia. And education and research and support is available to you. So when dementia is a diagnosis, it is helpful for you and I to be aware that there are many different forms of dementia, and not to put every person with dementia or every dementia diagnosis into the same bucket. In fact, I found out there's over 100 forms of dementia. But of course, the one that we hear about a lot is Alzheimer's dementia, which affects 60% of those with cognitive decline. But I've also done a podcast prior to this, so you may want to look that up, where I caution those listening to a podcast like this and then looking at people and thinking, do they have dementia or not? And I want you to dwell for a minute in the or not. Maybe it's not dementia, because in that podcast, I talk about cognitive changes that can affect people that are really due to maybe an infection or a medication that they're taking. Maybe it's lack of sleep. Sleep deprivation does some major things to your brain, but it could also be depression, anxiety. There could be changes in mental status due to stroke, even hearing or lifestyle. We're starting to hear more and more about the effect of lifestyle on our cognition. So surely don't put everybody in the same bucket and don't think it's always dementia. But if there has been a diagnosis, or if you're beginning to suspect that things are starting to change, I think it's important for us, as those who might be caring for somebody, to start noting those changes. Maybe have a little notebook noting time of day or when these changes seem to be occurring. Also, you might want to note if a person is sleeping a little too much or not enough. Are they up and roaming around at night and coming back to bed? Are they hungry in the night? What about increased anxiety or agitation? And there could be repeated words, a lot of repetition in words and possibly in actions. And then, of course, if there are tasks that are becoming more difficult to perform, even with cueing and reminders, that's also something that you want to note. And when you make those notes, then please feel free to report those to the physician that is caring for your loved one, or maybe you'll be reporting to a new specialist. But also you can bring those changes that you're noticing to organizations that are designed to support those with a dementia diagnosis. Well, the reason why I am bringing you this podcast today is always to help you understand and to learn where to get support and information that you might need to know. I went to a conference. It was on Parkinson's disease, and the presenter was a nurse practitioner, and she said one line that just clicked in my brain, and I thought, I've got to bring this to my listeners. And what she said was, it could be possible that someone with Parkinson's might present at some point with dementia, and it could be Lewy body dementia. Well, I know that I don't know everything about every form of dementia, and I'm not a dementia practitioner. So if you are not a dementia practitioner today, you are in good company. But my guest and I are going to help you to recognize and find out where to get hope and help if you have someone you're caring for, or if you yourself have been diagnosed with Lewy body dementia. So I did a quick internet search on Lewy Body Dementia and found out that there is a wonderful organization called the Lewy Body Dementia Association, and it is the leading national organization dedicated to improving the lives of those living with Lewy Body Dementia. Sometimes you'll hear the initials LBD. And this dementia, it's the second most common form of neurodegenerative dementia affecting 1.4 million people in the US. This association was established in 2003, and the Lewy Body Dementia Association's mission is to optimize the quality of life for those affected by LBD and by accelerating awareness, advancing research for early diagnosis and improved care, and providing comprehensive education and compassionate support. So I reached out to the Lewy Body Dementia Association and I got to speak to Brandy. And Brandy's here with me today. So Brandy Hackett, she is a licensed clinical social worker, but she also has more initials behind her name. She is a certified advanced social work case manager, and she is the senior manager of support services at the Lewy Body Dementia Association. So, Brandy, say hello to my listeners. I would love to learn a little bit about how long you've been with the Lewy Body Dementia Association, as well as how your background, how you got there.
Of course. Thank you, Linda, for having me and for giving us this platform to help others understand a bit more about Lewy. Um, Again, my name is Brandy. I've been a social worker now, which is hard to believe, for over 21 years. And 5 years ago, I was led to the chair that I'm in right now. So I've been with the Lewy Body Dementia Association now for 5 years in leadership here in the support team. And so I'm honored to sit here and to have met all the individuals that I have met from this space. It's one of the situations where you think you know about something until you're in it and you talk about it so much more. So I can tell you, as I tell so many people, I learn every day as well. And in gaining that knowledge, really appreciate the opportunity to be there for families and individuals as they're facing this.
Absolutely. It's such a help. And I agree with you. So if you are feeling like you don't know everything, you're in good company today, like I said, because even those who work with Lewy body disease, dementia, I'm sorry, there's more to learn. And everybody is unique and the presentations are unique. And so we're just going to be in an attitude of learning today. So thank you so much for being with me. So let's just get to our first question, Brandy. I want to know if you could, I know you can do this, but can you share how Lewy body dementia can be different from other forms of dementia? And then who might be affected by Lewy body dementia?
Absolutely. This is a tricky condition. I'm gonna be honest, and it can be quite confusing. So I'm gonna take just a couple minutes to break it down
Thank
in the
you.
most simple way I know how. But I think the biggest thing is to understand that this one label, Lewy body dementia, really represents two different conditions. And so people will use the label sort of interchangeably with these, but we know that that is an umbrella term. So when we talk about Lewy body dementia, know that we're really talking about two types. The first one is something called Parkinson's disease dementia. And I'm so grateful that you learned about that in the conference because a lot of people do not know. And it's a high majority of individuals with Parkinson's can develop a dementia. And remembering dementia is really a change in a person's cognition,
Right.
their thinking, their memory, their ability, their focus that is different from their baseline and that affects their daily life. And so what we find is there can be a progression and a change after Parkinson's. And sometimes that's referred to, you'll also see it seen as Parkinson's disease dementia. The other version under the umbrella is something called dementia with Lewy bodies. So a little confusing when it's almost the same word, but sort of flipped around.
All right.
What that means is those symptoms of dementia, those changes happen first.
Okay.
However, the person can also have changes in movement. Sometimes that's called Parkinsonism. So again, similar word, but just means sort of looks and acts, but not clinically Parkinson's.
All right.
And the reason both are under this umbrella is because they're caused by these things in the brain called a Lewy body. And why this is a different type of dementia is because those brain changes are different. So when we go back to Alzheimer's, we're thinking about plaques and tangles and other things. This is a different protein. And so the different protein, typically classified as something called alpha-synuclein, clumps up and it becomes this Lewy body. And so then it affects the brain cells and can lead to the presentation that we see. And so our dementia shows up in cognition, but often in a different way than people think. So if you or I were to go on the street and say, what is dementia? Most people would say when you can't remember. So they think about memory as that classic feature, and I don't blame them. You just said Alzheimer's is the most common, and that is a key feature of Alzheimer's. However, those with the changes related to Lewy body dementia show a very different cognitive change pattern. So they're having much greater issues in what's called executive function, which is sort of being the CEO of our day, managing all of that. They're having different changes to their attention span. They're having different changes to something called visuospatial, which is the brain's ability to have an idea of what's around us and do that brain math. So if I have a cup and I go to place it on a table, I don't miss. My brain is helping me understand sort of where my body is in space, not outer space, but the space around me.
Right, right.
And so those are a few of the cognitive changes. Now, changes in memory can be a part of that, but what we find is that can often happen much, much later. And
Okay.
the other piece with us, and we'll talk just a few, is fluctuations. For us, it can be very frustrating because there can be moments where you're like, I thought something was going on, the person experiencing it and the care partner watching it. And then later in the day, they're like, whoa, something is definitely going on. There are definite changes. And so a key piece to ours are these fluctuations, that it is not this continual constant, that there are sincere points of, we'll say, almost baseline ability and other moments of struggle. And sometimes we'll see this affected by pressure, stress. You mentioned who's affected. It's typically those over 50. We do have a few younger and some even into their 80s and 90s and older, but typically those over 50. And if you think about that, a lot of people in their 50s are still working, sometimes in their
Right.
60s and 70s. And so, what we find, just like anything, when the brain is under pressure, stress, deadlines, et cetera, expectations, um, and the struggle is there, those changes are causing those hiccups, those problems, those difficulties. It's going to sometimes show up, as one of our doctors says, more in their thinking than in their memory. So
Okay.
the changes in cognition you have to think is not just memory, but you'll see those major changes in thinking along with fluctuations of that. So again, times when, and so going back to your original point of like, could it be sleep? Could it be this? That's what everyone wants to think, that it's stress, that it's sleep, that it's this, because they're having still moments of a lot of ability and then moments where there's real struggle. Um, Not only because of this sort of attachment to changes in movement, we see the changes in cognition, but we also see changes in movement that either are Parkinson's or resemble Parkinson's. There's
Okay.
changes in sleep. So part of the sleep can be part of this dementia.
All
One
right.
of the key factors is something called REM sleep behavior disorder, which can happen sometimes decades before other symptoms. And that's when a person is dreaming, is asleep, and you'll sometimes see their eyes move, but their body typically doesn't. There's some issue with the sort of the switch in the brain, and the
Okay.
people start acting out their dreams. So they may harm themselves, their bed partners, etc. So we've got issues with thinking, issues with movement, issues with sleep. We also have something called autonomic changes. That's our brain's sort of city center of controlling things we don't think about. So our breathing, our blood pressure, our temperature regulation. It's not like I'm going okay, I got to cool down. Sometimes, some days, but most of the time, my body's doing that on my behalf. My
Okay.
body, my brain is regulating my blood pressure. So when I stand up, I don't pass out. It's helping to recalibrate some of that. We
All
can have
right.
change in that. So it also can affect things like continence, drooling, balance. There's a whole things in what our body does automatically to keep us going.
Mm-hmm.
All of that plus one more thing, and I'll stop talking.
No, you're
Um,
fine.
the neuropsychiatric presentation, which can be very key and often um, disruptive, troubling, and it's when a person experiences a reality that others aren't experiencing. So many
Okay.
times with Lewy, they can have something called an illusion, which is sort of something's there, but their brain is telling them it's something else. So seeing like a face in a tree, let's say,
Okay. Mm-hmm.
feeling the presence of someone that isn't there. They could have a hallucination, which is typically visual.
Yes.
But it can be other senses, and they can be simple, basic, and they can also be super complex and detailed. To the point of being able to count the buttons on a jacket of someone that no one else can see.
All right.
And the other piece of that is something called a delusion. And that's when there's a fixed false belief that gets stuck in the brain. And
Mm-hmm.
that fixed false belief, irregardless of the reality that's being proven, says your spouse is cheating,
Yes.
says, um, I'm not in the right house, says there are things in my food, says there are people in my bed around the table that I need to be worried about. I can't sit in that chair because someone is there. And a key one that I have learned so much about is capgras or capgras, which basically, if I were to come to you and say, "Hey, where's Linda?" and you'd be like,
Right
"Is
here.
here, two thumbs." No, 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 the nice Linda.
Oh,
You're like, whoa. So it's sort of a duplication of that person. And that can show up in real things. So for example, if we were married and it was a holiday season and I don't think you're Linda and Linda has gifts, I may not allow you to open those gifts because you're not the person I think you are. And you have to think from both sides of that how painful those brain lies are. But
mm-hmm.
those are some of the key symptoms. So as you can see, this is very different than some of the other dementias, and the presentation can vary depending on person, but those are a lot of the patterns that we can see with the changes that can happen.
Hence the reason why you have an organization dedicated to this form of dementia, because it is unique. And in my years of professional experience working with folks with dementia, I would definitely say that in the folks that we have served, it has been an early onset situation where the person was diagnosed in that 50 to 60 time frame, and of course beyond, because we have clients who are seniors who will say to us, I have sort of a Parkinsonian dementia diagnosis, or I don't have Parkinson's, but I have this, form of, and then we know what they're telling us. But just like Brandy has just shown us, it's going to present in different ways. And your person, if you're living with it or you're caring for somebody, you may not get it all. You may have a form or a piece. It's just unique. So again, not to throw a lot at a person and make you worry, but just so that you get a high level viewpoint of what this could be like, and then how to make change, make those notations about what you're seeing so that you can get the help that you need and the support services. So, Brandy, I think about the folks that obviously are living with Lewy body dementia, because there's going to be some changes in their work life, in their social life, in their home life, and a lot of different parts. Okay. But the person who is now going to have to step into the role as a caregiver, who is going to, because of those changes in executive function, who is going to have to stand in that gap and to be helpful and available, the caregiver. Are there some best practices for caregivers caring for someone with Lewy body that they should be aware of?
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the things that is so key is to really learn, be an active, curious learner. Um, we talked about the grace and not knowing, and I think that's so, so important. But do know there is a lot out there to learn. We host webinars monthly, often digging in a full hour on a specific symptom. So all of that I just rattled off, think about
Wow.
boiling that down and just talking about sleep for an hour, just talking about
Amazing.
autonomic changes for an hour. So do know that learning sort of comes in phases. We know that we can have surface level learning and then we can dig in deeper. So I think just being open to knowing that there are treatments in terms of there are ways that symptoms can be managed. In terms of certain medications that can be used, certain techniques that can be used. I think one of the hardest parts for caregivers is, um, you know, just like any dementia, you're watching your person change.
Yes.
And as you know, we talked about a really good conference, one that I sat in that I love. They said, as a dyad, as a care partner and a person who's experiencing the changes themselves, one is feeling it and not seeing it, and one is seeing it and not feeling it in terms of their perspective. And so it is really because there is so much awareness and ability for those that are diagnosed with this dementia, it is for a very long time a partnership of learning. It is not necessarily from day one the care partner having to come in and swoop in and do all. There can be a long time where the person has a tremendous amount of ability to do a lot of things, to participate, to engage. And so I think um, really continuing to include the person as much as possible is really key. And learning together. We have a lot of things where there's opportunities for both. Any presentation that I give, I welcome all audiences because I want what I say to be helpful to caregivers, of course, but I also want it to be helpful for those that we serve. And I always want to remember how much they matter as well. And because of their awareness, however, tied to these fluctuations, care partners, I think one of the best practices is to really learn some flexibilities around that.
Hmm.
Uh, there will be times when the abilities are sincerely different, and that's hard. It's hard to plan for, it's hard to predict. And this can happen sometimes within an hour, within days, so this isn't like he's having a good week. It may be a good
Right.
morning or a good afternoon or a good few days. But
Hmm.
the fluctuation is a key feature of this. And so being able to write out the fact that there will be some times when less help is needed and other times when more help is needed.
Hmm.
And then factoring in the physical changes, the sleep changes. And so there's a lot of modifications and moving targets for caregivers. And so keeping sort of abreast of this is what I need to know for now. This is what I
Yes.
need to know in these moments. And then being open to being a constant learner. And then also to connect. You mentioned even before we came on, you don't do this alone. This is not something that you have to do alone, and I really don't think you should. And so find ways to meet people, to talk to people, to break bread with people, to share stories with people, to laugh with people, to cry with people, but find community. And that's one of the beautiful things that we can offer here is pathways to help people connect to community, whether they are a caregiver or care partner or the person themselves diagnosed. We actually have support for both. And so I think it's important to um, understand that like everyone involved sort of has a place in this and really figuring out how to make those connections to support. And then, of course, advocate. Um, because this dementia is less known, we'll say. We're
Yes.
working very hard to make that different, but right
Thank
now,
you. Thank you.
it is less known. Um, you have to walk into situations assuming they don't know. And I say they meaning wide sweep of hand,
Yes.
everyone. Sometimes doctors, sometimes, often, unfortunately, police officers. There's a whole, you just have to assume that no one knows.
And
Uh,
professionals in community living are not always abreast or understand that just because there's a cognitive change that you're going to be perfect in this community and that we know exactly how to care for your loved one. So yes, exactly. It's just important and it is less known, and that's why I wanted to bring it to people to get the word out, because you're 50 years old ish, let's just say, and now you're in the middle of your work years. You've got kids probably going to high school or college, and now this has been a diagnosis. And I'll even say to professionals, it's hard for somebody who is early onset to just go sit in a chair. That's going to produce agitation and anxiety. They're fully functioning physically, usually, in the prime of their life, and now you just want them to go sit down. So, there's a lot of modifications, like you said, in that picture that need to take place. Very different from someone who is advanced ages and presenting with a cognitive decline, or like we said, the Alzheimer's dementia, or vascular or alcohol. There's just all forms. So thank you to the organization and to you for making this information available. And I'm going to bring that up at the end. We're going to tell you how to get connected. But Brandy and I were working on our technology right before we came on to record this podcast. And the beautiful thing is that even though this association is located in Atlanta, you can connect via the internet. So, because of COVID and our necessity to start new connections and be connected, this information and support groups are available. So, it is totally possible for the person living with Lewy to join the association and be a part of that and to get support that they need, but also for the care partner. Okay. So, the kind of education and support your organization offers, can we talk about that a little bit?
Absolutely. As mentioned, I lead our support team, and we support so many individuals and their families at different points in this. So we have a lot of support available for those that are really symptomatic but not diagnosed. So let's imagine that they are experiencing these changes and they're like, I Googled, which a lot of people are, I did internet search, and here you come. Like I put in A, B, C, D, and E, and this came up. Sometimes, they're learning about it from different places, or they may have had a hospitalization and they read in the chart after the fact that they mentioned the possibility of things. And so we get a lot of individuals that are really pre-label, pre-clarification of why,
Okay.
both the individuals themselves and their care partners. Sometimes we'll even have friends. We'll have the friend of the care partner call in and say, I don't want to put anything else on her. There's a lot of change, but I found this and wanted to bring this to her.
Yes.
We have a lot of individuals in that path. We have a lot of individuals that are themselves diagnosed, whether that be newly diagnosed or further along in their diagnosis, care partners in the exact same sort of pathway or trajectory. And then we also have support for bereaved care partners. I think it's very important to know that because this path is so different, bereavement can also be different. So we've
Yes.
created unique space for bereavement care for
That's
care partners
wonderful.
as
Thank
well.
you.
So under this support umbrella, I'll try not to talk too long, but I'm just so proud. So under support, we have our helpline. I like to clarify it as a helpline, not a hotline. So
Okay. Good
just leave
point.
us a message and we will call back. Like you mentioned, we are based here on the East Coast. We do service within the United States here for support. So we're typically here Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. And we do respond in those hours. We also have support groups, which we mentioned. You'll find those listed on our website under the support tab, but we have a tremendous amount, about 90 support groups nationwide. And so you can connect to us and we can help you connect, or you can find that information directly on our website.
All right.
For those that are diagnosed, there's a little bit more screening involved with that because
All
we want
right.
to make sure that things aren't just publicly available for anyone to come in without, clarifying that this is something that the person is facing. And so we have a tremendous amount of support and support groups available for those that are diagnosed. And then we have, let's see, Lewy Buddies, which are volunteers that are trained by us that have lived experience. They have to have lived experience.
All
And
right.
so what we say as professionals, as social workers, and those of us on support staff, we can provide a professional layer of support and connection. But there is nothing like connecting to somebody that what we'll call gets it, has been there, has had their journey, understands. What we'll find with caregivers is often they've connected to maybe a caregiver support group, and then maybe a dementia support group, and maybe an Alzheimer's support group, and maybe a Parkinson's support group. And then when they find what I'm going to call their people, and their people, like they don't have to explain. I still smile. I had this beautiful daughter call a couple years ago, and she said, "Hey, Brandy, my name is so and so. My dad has Lewy body dementia." And then she proceeded for 30 seconds to tell me what Lewy body dementia was.
Like you didn't
And
know.
then she cracked up and she was like, "Of course you know. I am so sorry." But she said, "I'm so used to people not knowing that my next sentence is always telling them what it is." And so I applauded her for that. I was like, "Congratulations. I'll probably be the only person today that is not appropriate for, that wasn't necessary." And
And that
so,
is so true because
oh,
people do not. We just don't know. And so it's so true what she just said because when it presents at a young age, you're like, what is going on? And sometimes you just don't know. Like, what just happened here? Was this an off day? Was this something that's going to be a part of our future? Is that, and that's where you go. And then that's what I want people to know, right?
mhm,
So that
absolutely.
and where to connect, because what she just said, I love that you shared that. That was a beautiful
Yeah.
story.
Well, and what those volunteers do with lived experience is they do what I call holding the flashlight. They hold the flashlight for someone else. There's no clear path. We know this. There's no predictable this and then this and then this. But having somebody that gets it, that can help you brainstorm, that can help, sit with you.
Yes.
Others may not be available. And I say sit virtually. Usually those are telephonic connections. We also have support Facebook pages, and these are platforms that are what's called closed groups on Facebook, which is a little
Okay.
confusing term. They're open for people to join, but they are closed, meaning you have to answer questions to be accepted to get in. And so we have a group for those that are newly diagnosed, both the care partners and those that are living with. We have one just for those living with Lewy, one for active care partners, and one for bereaved care partners. So we have those 4 pages. And so we can offer all of that support and a combination of that. And many times, we have a daughter with a Lewy buddy, a wife with a Lewy buddy. One of the things that actually shocks people is we have groups that are ran by individuals that are diagnosed themselves.
Okay.
We have Lewy buddies that are diagnosed themselves, and people's minds are blown. Like, what do you mean? My husband, who's symptomatic, can connect to another person. And I think that's a unique piece of this dementia, again, is that maintainability and really that sense of purpose. In the same way that we say caregivers should not do this alone, neither should people that are diagnosed, and really
Excellent.
funding, connecting to others that are there. So I'll tuck away support. So that's what we offer in support. But I'm also so proud of everything that has been built in education. Um, we have so many platforms and channels. I will start first with our website. Our website is an incredible resource of lots and lots of information. We also have webinars that are offered, and those all can be found on our YouTube page called LBDA TV. So you can
Okay.
see all of those. You can also be connected to certain topics through support. So we'll reach out to there. We have a Mediflix channel, which is sort of like Netflix for medical. So it has some very specific things. We have something called our Lewy Learning Center, which is a learning platform. It's beautiful where you can go in and there are certain topics. So one of the ones you mentioned, which I think is really key, is we had a registered nurse build out a sort of like set of lessons specifically for those providing hands-on care, direct care.
Wonderful.
What is Louis? What works? What do you need to know? What is helpful in terms of technique? So that those individuals feel like they have a toolbox that's there. And so the Louis Learning Center has these sort of classes, for lack of a better term, where you can go in and go through material. But we have one on Parkinsonism, we have one on psychiatric changes. We even have a little section, which I love. I do quite a few of the videos on there called our tip jar, which is when people ask us questions and then we go on and record a video and answering
I
those.
love it.
So I did a tip jar recently and a wonderful question came in on how do I talk to children? So it was a grandson. How do I talk to a grandchild about my dad's changes with Louie? And
Yes.
so we did a little video on some tips around that specific to our dementia. And I think that's what makes our education unique is that it is under this umbrella. So although some things can apply for other dementias, it's really hyper specific to all of these changes and all of these unique scenarios that those with our conditions have.
Wonderful. There is so much out there, friends, and I do hope that if you're listening and this has not affected you or someone in your family, you've now heard this information. You can then share this podcast with them so that then they can connect with Lewy Body Dementia Association and all the things that Brandy just mentioned, all the ways to connect are going to be in the show notes. So you're going to be able to get that contact information. And I love the fact that you're giving caregivers and those who are living with Lewy bodies a safe place to meet with others where other people can't get into those chats. It's just really focused and safe, and you can feel comfortable entering those chats because you know that you can let your guard down. You know that you can share what's really going on and get real time listeners and real time answers, solutions, guidance, direction. So that is super huge. And yes, you should be proud of your organization. And I know that I'm going to be telling more people about it. So Brandy, you run support groups. Your background is in social work, so I know you have compassion and interest in helping others. So from your professional experience or even personal experience, what kind of caregiver tip could you offer my listeners today?
Yeah. I think for me, um, the biggest permissions we give really fall in that self-compassion space. I can't tell you how many caregivers, and I'm talking Nate down, doctors, web professionals who feel like they should know, caregivers who feel like they should have known or should know, those that are diagnosed, I should have noticed, I could have noticed, I should know. Um, no, you shouldn't. You really shouldn't. And why would you? And that's so we give a lot of grace and compassion about that. I think the biggest tip is the importance of learning.
Mhm.
The importance of taking that learning to others. And so we have to think this is like a rock in a pond. There's a lot of ripple effects. So not only does it affect the person themselves, all of their changes that they're experiencing, the care partners who I sometimes say those who love and support them, which aren't always the what I'm going to call natural relationships or expectations of who a caregiver should or could be.
Right?
Um, and then you have bands of support. And so I think it's important. And I hate that it feels like it's the responsibility of those that are directly affected, but often it is to help those in those circles of support better understand. Um, because people really do the best they can with what they know. That's what I typically say. But if you don't know, which many people don't, then you don't really have a space to work from. And so introducing that within your faith community,
Right.
trusted people, giving it to physicians and medical providers in your circles, helping, open up those conversations. Hey, could we try? Hey, have we thought about this? This worked, this didn't. And so I think using any opportunity to learn is important, but I think the first step is not to beat yourself up because you didn't
Right.
know.
Right.
Because honestly, you shouldn't. And so I remind people, I know what I know here because this is my job to know. It is
Yes.
not your
Yes.
job to know. And we know not only does this hit and it's a lot to learn, but it's hitting at a very hard time. And our brain isn't built for new information in hard times. Our brain is built to run and jump and make sure we're safe in hard times. It's not there to do our taxes in hard times. And so to understand that the brain is under pressure, you're in a tough spot, you're in a vulnerable spot. It often comes with a lot of emotional changes, and then you're trying to learn in that environment. And so it takes time. Um, it can be very easy to want to learn it all in about 3 days. I don't recommend that.
That's a
This is
crash course.
no, it's typically a marathon, not a sprint. That's what I tell people.
Mhm.
And so you do have time. And we ask people to take time, and we also ask people to sometimes set timers. Because as we know with the internet, it's a beautiful thing that you can literally look up and it's been 6 hours. So make sure that you are carving out time to learn, but that you are also carving out time for joy, for purpose,
Mhm.
for living. And that's why we say, instead of just saying diagnosed with, we say living with, because there are, as I say, a heck of a lot of Tuesdays after we label the why.
Right.
There's a lot of opportunities for continued life, continued engagement, continued volunteerism, continued sharing. And we have people that are recording songs and just living. And I think that's the key part is, yes, these are changes, but there's so many ways to maintain engagement and joy and purpose and to focus on that as well. So I think learn, 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 set some boundaries, share, 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 and then love and live. That's really what people
Absolutely.
need to continue to do.
Thank you so much. And if you can't tell that Brandy isn't passionate about what she does and and the organization, then you have not been listening today. I had a physician who called up me and he said, my mother is experiencing cognitive decline. I have, obviously, being a physician, I made sure that she was diagnosed, and the physicians have told me there is nothing else we can do for her. And I said, oh, I want to let you know that there's so much life ahead. There's so much in this journey that you haven't begun to live yet. And even though medically there may not be more that can be done for his mother who was advanced stage and had dementia, so not Lewy body, but what you said, Brandy, that I said there are programs and groups that can help join you on the journey that can lead your mom into the best life possible with this diagnosis. So hang on to that. And I agree 100% with what Brandy said. And I cannot thank you enough for being here today. And I think I just want to close with the person that you mentioned, the great example of the daughter who said, my loved one's been diagnosed with Lewy body dementia. Lewy body dementia is, and goes on, because this is going to be you as somebody who has the diagnosis or somebody who knows and it might be caring for the person, or my when you're going to a restaurant, my loved one has Lewy body dementia. I mean, sometimes you're going to have to share that information. And I think once we realize that we're not alone and that we're not the only one who has this diagnosis, that there's a lot of safety and a lot of camaraderie and a lot of ability to relax and in this space, knowing that you're not alone and there's people who are there to help you. So thank you so much, Brandy, to you. I know you are supported by a huge team of people and volunteers, Lewy Buddies, as well as medical community who has done so much to help caregivers and professionals who need this information. And my job is to then promote and say, hey, call the Lewy Body Dementia Association. So thank you so much for being with me today and helping our listeners understand what you do have available at your organization. And also, thanks for all you do. We appreciate you.
Thank you. We appreciate you too. And thank you for your trust and allowing us to be here.
Absolutely. Thank you for joining me today. Are you ready to learn more? Go to seniorsupportstrategies.com. As always, I value the time you spend with me.